Welcome to the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society's Beginner Gardening series. It is brought to you by folks who are members of PHS. And so if you are not a member of PHS, get on that page, phsonline.org, and join. Memberships are not that expensive. And especially those familiar faces that I've seen for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks coming to our free workshops. If you're not members, it's time to step up and be counted. Speaking of stepping up and being counted, I also want to say something about the Harvest 2020, which is a new initiative of the Horticultural Society, which is a challenge to 100,000 gardeners in the area, tri-state area mostly, to step up and be counted as people who are growing food. You can grow food for yourself, you can grow food for your family, for your friends, for your community, for food banks and soup kitchens, and you can also donate so that PHS can give gardening kits to people who can't afford them so they can grow food for themselves and for their community. I want to welcome you to the world of bugs and introduce you to Adam Hill, who is one of our, a member of our City Harvest team at PHS. And he has been, oh, we have to go into the PowerPoint first, don't we? Sorry, Cassidy. I jumped the gun on that. We're going to do, I am not going to parade bugs across your screen today because I don't have all of these bugs, thank heavens. So we're going to use some photos of bugs because we're going to show a lot of stuff that people recognize and some stuff that you don't recognize. What Adam is talking about in his beautiful, immaculate backyard, which breaks my heart because my yard is not like that at all. He's saying that we need to know, we need to do a bunch of things before we start getting out the great guns and spraying everything. The best thing that we can do is think about our soil. And we've talked about this endlessly in all of the other workshops. The best defense against any kind of bugs and diseases is to have strong plants, because bugs and diseases are opportunistic. They really, really, really like plants that are under stress, that are badly, that are suffering from malnutrition or stress of not having enough nutrients in the soil. They really, really like plants that are stressed from moisture, too much water, not enough water. So the best thing that we can do right up front is to make sure that our soil is good, because the more nutrients we have in our soil, the more living beings we have in our soil, the good guys, the little guys, the better defense the plant will have against being overcome by one particular organism, be it a bug or a disease. So we've got taking care of our soil. Then we're thinking about the timing of our plants and putting the right plant in the right place at the right time. So if it is hot as blazes outside, this is not the time to be thinking about, well, actually, that's a bad example because we're about to start doing that. It's not good when it's really, really, really hot to be planting plants that would prefer the ground to be cool and the air to be cool. So we give the plants the best, the benefit of planting them at the right time. We don't plant frost-sensitive plants when it's too cold. We don't plant, we don't plant our summer stuff in the spring, and we don't plant our spring stuff in the summer because we want to give it the best boost that we can. So we're timing things right, and we're putting the plants in the right place. If we, because of the timing of everything, we've done all our homework, we've figured out when things need to be planted, we're going to think about where they need to be planted. Things that don't like hot blazing sun, we're going to try to keep them in the shady side of the garden. Conversely, that stuff that really, really, really wants the full sun is not going to grow well in the shade. So putting the plants in the inappropriate places is another good way to set yourself up for the bugs, for the advance of the bugs and diseases. Another thing that Adam talks about in his video, and Cassidy's given you the link so that everybody can go and watch this as soon as you're done here to reinforce everything that we're saying today. Besides that, Adam and his baby are just so freaking cute. You got to watch that. So we've got right plant, right place, right time. We've got beefing up our soil. And then we've got knowing when the bugs are coming so that we can set things up to prevent the stuff that otherwise we would have to deal with. And we talked about that before, and you saw that in the picture. Adam has his plants covered with archways, covered with, here, I have some right here. I just went out and bought some. I have, I didn't have my weed this morning. Screening. I am going to be planting in the next few weeks. I'm going to be planting my fall season cole crops, my cabbage and broccoli and stuff, and I'm going to be covering it with insect netting. You can see it. It lets the light through, it lets water through, it lets air through, but it doesn't let those stinking bugs through. So I am going to be using a lot of prevention in my soon-to-be fall garden so that I can keep the bugs out. Okay, so knowing the safest thing to use if you get to the point where you still have bugs. The bugs are going to be there. The bugs are going to take advantage of situations. So once I have prevented as many bugs as I possibly can, I'm still going to get the bugs. They're still going to show up, but hopefully they don't show up in the masses that that are going to overwhelm your garden. And hopefully the prevention, the different prevention things that you've done will keep the bugs away. And we're going to talk about that when we go through all the individual bugs.
Sally, where do you get your insect netting?
I bought mine at Primex. I went to the garden center and bought it. You can mail order it. It is called, this is very complicated something. It's called insect netting. So search for insect netting and you can get it mail order somewhere. There's also insect netting, and then there's also something called, the brand name is called Remay or Harvest Guard. But what it is it's like interfacing, but very, very, very fine. It's a pressed, spun rather than woven fabric, and it will also work as an insulator to keep plants shaded in the summer or warmer in the spring and fall. So you can also use it as a season extender. So and we can also send you information about those in the links. So we've talked about prevention, but suppose the bugs show up anyway, because, okay, how could we possibly have known that the spotted lanternflies were coming? And what, just as an example, and what could we have done to prevent them? Well, not a whole lot of anything, except maybe not grow grapevines or hops or cucumbers or any of the plants that they seem to prefer, but they showed up anyway. So then we have to make some life and death decisions for ourselves and for these bugs. How much damage can we handle and accept? Because 80%, there's the rule of 80-40. I know we talked about 70-30 when we're talking about soil, but the rule of 80-20, I don't know my math and I can't count my fingers. So 80% of the work gets accomplished with 20% of the effort. To get to 100%, to get that extra 20% of perfection, you've got to put 80% of effort in. So you've got to work really, really hard for that last 20% of results. If we're willing to go with 80%, that means we're willing to accept some holes in our plants and some damage and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, then we are largely okay. It's when we must have perfection and we must have these beautiful plants with no spots, and that's when it gets really hard. So if we can accept this 80%, this little bit of damage, That means we can get by with minimal, really minimal amounts of spraying or fixing a problem once it happens. So what we want to know is what are the least toxic methods that we can use to get rid of the bugs once we've got them. So the least toxics are of course the things that have no chemicals in them whatsoever. And that would be like, okay, I have gotten notes from people who are out with shop vacs sucking up the spotted lanternflies. They're using traps to catch both the nymphs and the adults. They're using shooting them with blasts of water. Again, no toxicity to any of that stuff. Then you graduate to the little bit of what are the things that I can use? What are the things that do the least amount of damage that are the most organic? And then we start talking about insecticidal soap and neem and BT and those much more organic plant derived and bacterially derived. And then we get into the nuclear options of the, oh, got to get out the 7, got to get out the Roundup, got to get out the, and show who's boss. And really, most times you don't need those unless you're really going for that 100% perfection. So if you can accept a little bit of damage, then you can mostly get by with the stuff that is not going to cause damage to the environment or to your health. I confess, I've been dealing with mosquitoes all summer. They are horrible in this place because it looks like the woods, so they're fooled as well. Actually, I live on North 10th Street. But the mosquitoes are so bad here that I have started to use the DEET bug repellent the last few days. And I realized this morning that my coffee doesn't taste the same. And I'm noticing, and I've noticed this other summers. So it's like I'm off the DEET now and I'm on the the citronella and geranium oil, which doesn't seem to last as long, but boy, when I use it every half an hour, I smell so good. So what is the last thing that we want to know about? Oh, no, what Adam doesn't say in his video, and I'm gonna say right now, is you gotta know when to throw in the towel. Sometimes you gotta go nuclear or you gotta go in the trash. So you make the choice, am I going to spray the heck out of this with this, and this? Or am I going to take a trash bag and I'm going to put it over the plant and yank the plant out, tie it off, and send it out to the trash? So there are sometimes when you get to that point, and your best bet is to get rid of the plant, send it away, and start over or grow something else. So I think that's most of what Adam covered, but like I said, we'll go over the different details of what are the specific pesticides that we might accept using, and what's specific for each plant. But I think we'll do that. I do want to encourage everybody to go and see Adam's video afterward, because it really is 3.5 minutes of absolute common sense in the garden, and you get to see baby Jack. So good stuff. So Cassidy, we're going to get back to the PowerPoint, to the part where we don't have to see a video actually working, and let's talk about our nemesis here. And that is, of course, there. Okay. Go back one. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, the hoops. Adam has made his hoops out of, in some he has a wire hoop, and in other he just uses PVC pipe that he bends over his bed and then covers it with, he's a very neat and tidy, I just throw it over and tie knots in it. His is stretched tight and gorgeous. He also is using chicken wire to keep the chickens out because he considers them pests as well. And he's doing everything within his beds to keep the bugs out before they can get ahead. This is important, but I wanted you to see what the hoops look like. Okay, now we can go on to the lanternflies. Okay, how many people, let's see a show of hands, how many people have not seen these? I can't imagine that you haven't seen them. And we've seen them in every single different stage. They look like little crabs from another planet or another dimension, and they hop sideways. And the major damage that they do as babies, as adolescents, as adults, they suck juices. They and it's not a moth, it's a bug. It's got, which means it's got 6 legs. The major business is to suck juices out of trees. It loves its host plant. Its favorite host plant is of course the ailanthus tree, the tree of heaven. I've heard it affectionately referred to as the horse piss tree because that's what it smells like. But it is it's a weed tree here in the Philadelphia area, and that's where they seem to be the happiest. They also seem pretty happy on silver maples, but where we're seeing more and more of them is on the grapevines and hops vines. And I've heard reports, I have not seen this on my cucumber vines, but people said that say that they've had a lot of them on their cucumber vines. The problem is there aren't many pesticides that work on them. So what we have been doing is using traps, more traps, or like I said, I talked to some people that had just permanently installed their shop vac in the backyard, and they go out and they vacuum the grapevine every morning. And they have been collecting thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So they're not, the damage that they do, they can weaken the plant because they are sucking juices from it. But more what happens is they suck the sweet juices and then they poop. And the poop is very sweet. And it coats the plants that are under where they are. So it might cover your grapevine with this fine poop called honeydew. And then mold grows on it because it loves that sweetness. And so it's the mold that is detrimental to the plants, because the mold is, it's gray and it covers the surface of the plants, and then the plants are not green anymore. And so they are not as able to do photosynthesis. So they're fighting, they're like trying to soak the sun up through a cloud. And so it can weaken the plant. It doesn't actually, there's not a whole lot of evidence that it actually kills plants, but it will weaken them. So what can we do? What are the pesticides? When we're using spray, people are saying I use Safer Soap on it. Safer Soap is not particularly effective on them unless they're just the teeny babies, because they're sucking insects, so it should work on them. Other people are using Neem on them, and the jury is still out. There's not a whole lot that's been really effective, short of catching them in the traps. So my philosophy is, at this point, we're just going to roll with it and see what next year brings. I have found their absolute most favorite plant that I've encountered is the porcelain vine, which is the false grapevine. And so I'm taking this occasion to get rid of as much of the false grapevine as I can, because it's a terrible weed anyway, and it's choking the trees. So, okay, by roll with it, Patty, I mean, we're just gonna let it roll over us, because at this point, it's not killing things, and we're getting so crazed over it that we're starting to get nuclear, and that means we're getting out. I've heard people say, "Oh yeah, I sprayed Raid all over my garden." Oh my God, you sprayed Raid all over your garden. Raid, what we're putting so much effort into this that we're going to start killing the bees. And the bees are on fragile ground right now as it is. So we really don't want to be pulling out all of these big pesticides to get rid of this. Let's go with the more gentle. Let's use the Safer Soap. Let's use the traps. Let's use the vacuums if we've got them. if that's what we need to get some peace of mind. But know that they are at this point not killing anything except possibly the hops vines. So I would say let's just raise a glass of beer to them, but that could get a little tough if they eat all the hops vines. So let's look at that. Enough said about the spotted lanternfly. We're not going to win this one, but we're not going to lose this one. So we're going to sit back and we're going to watch what happens. In the meantime, I have seen some really, really, really beautiful earrings made out of the wings of those lanternflies. So go with that. Cabbage worm. Cabbage worm is a horrible. This is why we are covering our cabbage, collards, broccoli, everything like that. We're covering them. That's what we're using the screening for. That's what we're using the covers for, because those, as we're sitting in our yards or in our gardens, watching those beautiful butterflies go by, we see the little white one that just goes twit, flit, 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 flit across our gardens, and they're really beautiful, cute little things, white butterflies. And what they're doing is each time they're landing on a plant, they're sticking an egg on the surface of one of our cole crops. And each egg hatches out into one of these worms. They look like this, or they look like just the plain green ones. But what they do is they eat the plants, and they are the perfect eating machines. They just eat, and they just keep eating until there's nothing left but little ribs of the plants. And as they eat, they're just turning every ounce of that into body size. So they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And eventually then they spin a cocoon, or they go into this funny little shape and emerge as the beautiful butterfly. So if what you want is the butterflies, you let them go. If what you want is the cabbage and the collards and the broccoli and stuff like that, then you have to either keep them away by using the barriers, or you need to every night go out and squeeze every little green worm you see. Or the other thing that people are using on these is BT. BT is Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a bacteria that is it's related to the same stuff that we kill mosquitoes with, but the particular BT that we use is let's see, I got some BT. Is a spray, and what it does is it affects their digestion. They have to eat it, so it's only for chewing insects. Putting the spraying it on there, they eat it, and it's a bacteria. It's a digestive bacteria, and they stop digesting their food and they die. And it's a very sad thing for them, but a very happy thing for us, because it means that we still get heads of cabbage and heads of broccoli. So, so for this, we're using hand squishing. If we have only a few plants. With a lot of plants, what we want to do is make sure as they're planted, they have to be pristine plants. We have to make sure that we've cleaned, that there are no eggs on them. You put them in the ground, and then instantly you cover it. And you do not lift the covers unless you're actually working with the plants. Because if you lift the covers, people seem to think that they block the light. So, okay, I'm going to open it during the day to let in more light, and then I'm going to close it at night. And in the meantime, the butterflies have gone in. The other thing that oddly enough eats these are yellow jackets and wasps. I've seen them just go all over the cabbage plants and pick them up and carry them away. And God bless them, they are welcome to them. So if I have eggs on my young plants, because they've been sitting in the yard for 3 days before I planted them, and then I cover them and I don't look at them for a couple of weeks, what I've done is I've made a safety net for the worms that are on the inside. So when you plant your plants, make sure they are absolutely pristine, and inspect every leaf, then put them in, then cover them with the covers. If you have to, because you've missed it, get some BT, some spray BT, and use that on them. All right. Next slide. Oh, this is the bane of my existence, except they are so, so beautiful. Harlequin bugs this is where people have to be really careful, because if you see the young ones up in the corner, they look a lot like ladybugs. And so people think A, that they're ladybugs and they leave them alone, or B, think that ladybugs are them and they kill the ladybugs. So these guys, although they don't seem to at this point carry diseases, what they do is totally devastate the plant. And 4 or 5 of them can wipe out a planting of, you know, they can go right up the line, and you have 4 or 5 of them, and then you've got 400 or 500 of them, and then 4,000 or 5,000 of them, because they reproduce like crazy. And you'll get to the point that there is more beetle than there is plant. And so what do we do to prevent them? In the very early stages, because they're a chewing insect, sucking insects get safer soap or insecticidal soap. Chewing insects get Neem. They are chewing insects, and on the very young ones, Neem works. Neem does not seem to work on the older ones. So our best bet for these is prevention. So again, we've got to, and they affect the same plants that the cabbage worms do. So what we need to do is to make sure that as soon as we get them planted, we cover them with the netting. That's the best bet. These guys have only been here in Philadelphia probably, I would say, the last 15 years at the most. And they seem to, at this point, have no natural enemies. So our best bet, again, is prevention. And then our last ditch is not to get out the raid and the nuclear stuff, but to, if you've got one particular plant that is worse affected than all of the others, then that's the one that you let it go, let them get infested, and then bag the whole thing with a plastic bag, pull it out of the ground and tie it off and put it out for the trash. These are not they are not fun. This is, in this picture, they lay eggs. The eggs are it's like a perfect double line of barrels on the underside of the plant. And you can see them. They're not this large, but they are easy to see, easy to identify. And you just crush them with your fingers. They're a little hard, they're crunchy, so you really gotta, or scrape them off into soap water. So that's what the eggs look like. Okay, Japanese beetles. I was talking to Anne at Primex today, which is my favorite garden center because they have everything. And besides that, they're a sponsor of Harvest 2020, so I don't feel bad about mentioning their name here. And she said that Japanese beetles are a terrible problem. They're either a terrible problem or you don't have them at all. She said most people don't seem to have them at all, and those that have them this year have them in unbelievable plenitude. So they are, when you're digging your garden in the spring, look at the picture on the far left, the first picture and then the third picture, those little worms with the brown heads, those are the babies of the Japanese beetle. And those are what, they also will kill your lawn. So if you get enough of them. So they are, they're under the soil, and in the spring they are busy eating the roots of your plants. And also, if you've got an issue with somebody coming and digging in your lawn, you'll see holes in your lawn more out here in the outer reaches of the city, and then in the burbs, where skunks and possums and moles and voles will also dig for them because they're a good source of food. So they wreak all kind of havoc on your lawn. And then in the summer, they come out and as the beetles, and they devastate your grapevines, your rose bushes. Those seem to be the 2 favorite things for them. So what do we do about them? Well, those are very easily attracted by traps because they love the smell of roses, and they are very easily attracted by pheromone traps. The traps are the traps are, if you've ever seen them, they're just a mechanical thing. It's just, you know, like two pieces of plastic that fit together like this, and there's a bag underneath, and they hang up, and you put a little dot of either pheromone. It all comes as a kit. It's rose scented and pheromone. So what happens is they smell the roses, they're attracted to the trap, they are affected by the pheromones. All they can think about is there are roses here and I want to have sex, and they start piling up on each other, and the weight of it on the guy on the bottom makes him let go, and they all fall into the trap. So in a matter of a day, you might fill this whole trap with Japanese beetles, and then you tie it off and either drown them or put them out for the trash. You can't leave them for more than a day or two, because then they start to smell bad, and this attracts flies, and then you get a fly issue. So you've got to keep after these traps, and you don't want to put the traps near your plants. You put the traps remote from your plants, because what you're going to do is you're going to attract every single beetle in the area. And if you put it in the middle of your rose bushes, you're attracting your neighbor's beetles into your rose bushes. You don't want to do that. So you have to be careful with these traps. The other time that you can affect these is back at the beginning, when the grubs are in the ground. You can get something called Milky Spore. Milky Spore is a bacterial disease that kills the grubs, and you can treat your lawn with it. It's non-toxic because it only affects the grubs in your lawn. So it affects these guys and the June bugs, which are a larger version of this, but not as deadly. Is not as deadly to your plants. So you can get the Milky Spore and you can treat your lawn with it, and it kills the grubs. The problem is that you can treat your lawn with it, but you can't treat your neighbor's lawn with it without their permission, and their Japanese beetles will emerge and come to get on your roses. So Milky Spore when they're young, pheromone traps when they're older. And like I said earlier, they seem to be a really bad problem or not a problem at all. So most of us have not seen this. Most of us are so busy seeing the spotted lanternflies that we're not even paying any attention to these guys. So next slide. The Milky Spore is something that you only use in the spring, because the grubs are not there in the summer. The grubs emerge in the summer, so early to late spring, but by the time June, July rolls around, it's too late and the grubs have already turned into adults. Okay, these are flea beetles, and they hop like fleas. They don't bite people, which is where people get confused, because they think that that flea beetles are actual fleas and that they can affect you. They don't bite people, but they do hop like fleas. And you can see up close what it's doing to this eggplant on the left. They're really bad on eggplants and then on turnips, because they chew tiny little holes, and it really does a job on the plant, because then photosynthesis can't happen. They don't seem to carry any diseases that I know of, but here's what because they are chewing insects, then we would choose Neem rather than the insecticidal soap. But in the old days, what we used was self-rising flour or lime, or talcum powder, which is a dust, because dusting them with a dust, some kind of dust, or even wood ashes on the surface of the plant irritates the heck out of them, and they're not happy, they don't stay long, and they don't seem to reproduce as much. I don't know, I've never known what the eggs look like, so I don't know whether they come in from come up from fly up from the south, or they just hop their way across and survive in the trash in your garden over the winter. But any kind of dust, so diatomaceous earth is pretty effective. to dust these guys with. Diatomaceous earth is, and we'll talk about that. Well, let's talk about it now. DE, diatomaceous earth, is ground up little tiny seashells that is effectively ground glass because it's silica, and it is all sharp edges, and they hate it and they go away. And people have also used it, sprayed it into cracks when ants are coming into the house. DE is also, if you draw a circle around plants that have been affected by slugs, the slugs don't like to cross it because it's very sharp. It's like very sharp sand. But when you use it, you don't want to just like randomly sprinkle it, because because it's ground glass, and if you inhale it, it will irritate your lungs as well. Not to the point where you're going to get disease and die, but it will irritate your eyes, it will irritate your nasal passages, and it'll irritate your lungs. So use it when the wind is not blowing, or make sure that it goes directly on the plants. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Oh my goodness, this is awesome. They are, I have heard that these guys, especially this really lovely pink guy in the middle here, which will get about 4 or 5 inches in size, was brought here intentionally because we didn't have the big snails here to make escargot, so they brought the slugs seemed happier here, and of course they got loose, and here we have it. They're everywhere. How do you deal with slugs? You deal with slugs and snails pretty much the same way. They have a very I won't say mucusy body, but everywhere they go, they leave a trail of slime. They're snotty creatures, and not snobby, snotty. And so they don't like crawling across, again, the DE, the diatomaceous earth. They don't like to crawl across that. They will crawl across sand. I've been, people have tried that, and it's not very effective. But there are studies done on using beer, stale beer, to attract them. They love the smell of yeast, and so they will go to old beer. So if you've got beer bottles with just a little bit of, like, who doesn't drink all their beer? Beer bottles in the garden, they are attracted. Oddly enough, Miller Lite seemed to be their preferred brand. My husband drinks Miller Lite.
Isn't Miller Lite the champagne of beer?
It used to be Miller High Life, the champagne of coffee.
Yes.
But I'm showing my age, and you're not old enough, Cassidy, to remember that. I could sing you that jingle, but I won't. But anyway, there are different kinds of baits that you can use that will draw them away from your plants and kill them. But you've got to be really careful with those, because the Slug Bait and Slug Geta, I think, are brand names. But you want to make sure that you put them down underneath something. Don't just sprinkle them around, because they look like pellets and birds might come and eat them, and they will make your birds crazy. They won't kill your birds, but they will make them act out. So these are a problem when when it's very moist, and they come out at night. They slime up all over your plants, and they eat a lot. And then when the sun comes out, they slime down again, and they go underneath something. So what you can do is pull your mulch back from your plants, because if mulch is right there, then they can just sneak up. But they move actually pretty fast. So here's what I do. When I get a slug problem, I put a piece of plywood out. They come out in the night, they do whatever it is they do. And then in the morning, they go underneath the piece of plywood. And then every day I flick the plywood over and squish the the slugs. But then I don't have thousands and thousands of them. If you have thousands and thousands, then you start thinking about getting the bait and put it under the plywood so that when they go under there, they eat the bait and they die. And the plywood keeps it safe from the birds, or keeps the birds from eating it. So yeah, everybody at some point in time has sprinkled salt on a slug. I think it's less torturous to step on it than to watch it hemorrhage all of its bodily fluids to get the salt off. I think it's more humane to just squish them. Next slide.
Crystal put in the chat that they've used copper rings and that it's working pretty well for them as well.
I haven't tried that, but I have heard that they don't like copper. So go try. That's not a bad idea. I should write that down because it's not something that I automatically thought of. Thank you, Crystal. Okay, squash bugs. Two things that affect squash bugs. Do we have squash borers in this as well?
It's the next slide, yes.
The next slide. Okay, let's talk about the squash bugs first. Okay, the problem with squash, they are a stink bug, and when you squish them, they stink. It's, but they suck the juices of the plants. They don't particularly chew, they more suck. And so what we use for them and for the bugs in the next slide are, again, exclusion. We plant our seeds and then we cover the whole thing with netting, and then they don't get in, because their problem is they suck things a lot and they will make your plants brittle. But sometimes they also carry a wilt that will cause sudden death of your squash plants. That's not as common. More they just chew, suck all the juices out of the plants, and the plants go fail to thrive. So for these and for the next guy, they are related to stink bugs, and they do stink. Let's go to the next slide, and then we'll just talk about these guys together. Because this is the next slide. This is a squash vine borer, which is not at all related, but it does cause, the cure is the same, the prevention is the same. What this is a moth that looks like a wasp, and it flies in and it lays eggs in the stem, and then these little happy little grubs eat their way through the whole inside of the stem. They eat everything inside, and you can see the mess they make. They'll do that through the whole stem. They'll do it up the leaf stems. They'll do it all the way down into the root. So what we want to do is to find a way to exclude these bugs. So the first one is something I moved it over there. Last week when we were talking about soils, we talked about clay, and I said there are, it's not really a pesticide because it's just clay, but they make you take the clay, it's called Surround is the brand name, and it's kale and clay. And what it does is, we have a new visitor here. Go away, go away. You mix it with water and you spray it on the plants as they are babies, and you spray the whole stem with it. And what it does is it hardens, as it dries, it hardens the stem, and it keeps the stem and the leaves from being having eggs laid on them, or being chewed on, or being sucked on by either of these two bugs. So this one works from the inside. Once the eggs are inside the stem, then the guy that hatches out just keeps eating on the inside. The squash bugs are on the outside, sucking juices from the outside. So between the two of them, we get this double whammy. So what we want to do is we want to prevent them from ever getting to the stem. So we can do this by spraying this clay over it, or we can do this by putting up the screening, the netting, anything like that as a prevention to keep the adult bugs from coming in and laying eggs. So once the squash bugs once these guys have gotten inside, what you'll see is suddenly you'll have zucchini and it'll be beautiful. And the next day the whole plant or one arm of the plant will be dead. And if you cut open the stem, you'll see that that there's nothing left on the inside. It is just, it's just all mush on the inside. So sometimes if you catch it in time because you haven't done exclusion or you let the clay wash off or, you know, whatever it is that happened, you can take a razor blade or a knife and cutting with the grain of the stem, go in and pick the suckers out. You got to keep going until you've got clean on either end of them. You got to make sure you get all of them out there. Which is a gross job. Or what I've seen other people do is figure out exactly where they are and then jab a paper clip through, you know, straighten out a paper clip and jab that through the plant to make sure that you've skewered all of them. I don't know how you would tell you've skewered all of them, but I have friends that swear by that. The other thing is that as each plant, with mine, I planted the seeds, I put the cover over, and the problem is once you get flowers, you have to make sure that the flowers are able to be pollinated by bees. The bees can't get through the netting either. So what you need to do is to plant the seeds, cover the whole thing, and keep them covered until you get to the point where you're starting to get female flowers. Now, for those in the know, because they've been to previous classes, the plant, most of the squash and cucumber plants will put out maybe even a dozen male flowers, which come on a skinny little stem. The flower comes on the end of a skinny little stem. Before they put out a female flower, because they want to attract all the pollinators so that when the female flowers finally develop, the pollinators are already there and they don't waste any time. So once the male flowers start to come out, you watch, and as soon as you see female flowers, that's when you uncover the whole thing, because at that point the plant is large enough that it is probably able to resist both the squash bug and the squash borer. So there's a bee fly thing here that wants to be part of the action. So are there some varieties that are more resistant? I don't know of any that are. So that's why I try to be careful of all of them to make sure that I have either sprayed them with clay or covered them with netting. Next slide. Okay, we need to think about the good guys too, and they are, the Monarch he's sitting here on an echinacea, but his favorite plant for raising the young is milkweed. So if we are growing milkweed plants for the flowers, but not for the monarchs, we're gonna have to try to keep the monarch butterflies away. I'm not gonna bother. My dad for many years grew a lot of different kinds of milkweeds outside of his house and right outside his back door. And the monarchs would come and they would lay so many eggs that these caterpillars that emerged, that looked like this little guy up here on the right, they would emerge and they would totally devastate the plants. They would put them down to nubs before they did their little chrysalis thing. And so you have to choose. Are you growing these milkweeds for your own enjoyment, or are you growing them for the habitat of the butterflies so that you can enjoy the butterflies? And I'm hoping that you're going to say, oh, I really am growing these for the monarchs. But know that they make a caterpillar, and the caterpillar will eat the plants down to the nubs. More so, do we have swallowtail butterflies in this picture, in the next slide? Yes. Okay. So these are they look similar if you don't know the difference. But look down in the corner, you see the difference between. They are the same colors, but they are different horses of a different color. These are a problem if you are trying to grow parsley, carrots, dill, fennel, any of the umbelliferous family. That's the family that gets a flower at the top that's like an umbrella, like a Queen Anne's lace. So, because they will lay lots and lots of eggs and they will eat your parsley down to nothing. So what I tell people to do is plant lots of fennel, because how much fennel, honestly, how much fennel can you use? Do lots of fennel around the edges of your garden. And if you start to see these guys coming in and eating your dill and your parsley and your carrots, gently pick them up and move them over to the fennel and let them devastate the fennel. And I'll just keep taking them out of your parsley if you want them. But because they do make these really, really, really beautiful butterflies. So sometimes you make the choice between how much damage can I put up with, and how much do I want to take care of the environment? Okay, what's the next slide? Okay, cucumber wilt. This is a problem, and it is caused by the cucumber beetle. And as you can see on the right-hand picture, they chew, and often they chew from the underside. There are two different kinds of cucumber beetles. They look like teeny little lightning bugs. They're either striped or spotted, and they're black and yellow, and they're about the size of a grain of rice. And they like to get on cucumbers, and they like to get on amaranth, which is a weed, and that's where they overwinter. They overwinter in amaranth, generally in trash piles and in hedgerows. So what happens is they come and they chew, and we could put up with the chewing, but the problem is they also carry a bacteria that they inject into the plants as they're chewing, and that's what causes this wilt on the left, because it gets into the stem, and they clog up. I don't know whether you would call it the veins or the arteries, but the water moving channels within the stems, they clog them up, and so they cannot move water, and that's what causes the wilt. So you'll have a perfectly healthy plant, and it's full of cucumbers or baby cucumbers ready to go, and suddenly you see that an arm of the plant or the whole plant has gone down in one day. How do we prevent it? Oh, for heaven's sake. Sorry. I'm supposed to have turned that down. The prevention is the same as you would use for your squash plants. You can spray the plants to keep them, actually it's tougher with these because they grow so fast and the stems are so small. So with cucumbers, your best bet is exclusion. So again, grow them under netting until you can, I mean, this is the way that organic farming is done now. Everything is done under netting because it's either so hard to find a pesticide that will be specific to an insect, or it's so devastating to the environment to spray the amount that we have to kill these bugs. So these are cleanliness in the garden to keep the amaranth out of the surrounding area, because that's a host plant for the bugs, and exclusion by screening. I guess you could use DE on them, diatomaceous earth, but it's hard because generally they're on the underside of the leaves. So getting DE, you would have to mix it with a spreader sticker, like a little bit of Dawn detergent, which I don't like to use in the garden, and spray it up from below to make it stick. Once you've got it, okay, here's one other thing that I have found works for really vigorously growing squash plants and really vigorous cucumbers that are sprawling along the ground. And that is, if you notice, anywhere that the stem goes along the ground, you'll see little stubby roots. They're adventitious roots. They're just sitting there waiting to be needed, and generally they're not. But if you, as something is crawling along the ground, mound soil over the stem as far out as it goes before the plant starts to climb, you can encourage rooting at a lot of different places so that your plant is not just coming up from one root, but as it sprawls, it's putting down additional roots so that if one limb of the plant is killed by the squash borer or the wilt, sometimes the other one is not. So we do all kinds of crazy things as gardeners, but this is something that sometimes works. But again, prevention is the best, Up until you start to get female flowers, then you have to uncover it because otherwise you won't get pollination. Okay. Early blight and then late blight are diseases. This is on tomatoes, and it's caused by a fungus. And the fungus is, okay, there are a bunch of different things that a black swallowtail butterfly just flew past. I'm not ADD or anything. The blights are caused by a fungus that lives in the soil. Sometimes it is brought in from, one year, I guess it was about 10 years ago, all of the tomatoes that came up from down south had it, and they were all sold in the big box stores, and we lost an almost entire crop of tomatoes that year because all of the nursery stock was infected by it. What happens is, as rain falls, it splashes on one of these lesions and splashes it onto the next leaf, and then the next leaf develops it, and then it splashes to the next leaf. It particularly loves cool, damp evenings. So the best thing that we can do is we can buy plants that are supposed to be resistant to the blights. They'll say VFFNTA, which is resistant to verticillium, fusarium, fusarium 1, fusarium 2, and nematodes, T, tobacco mosaic, and A, anthracnose. So, you can buy stuff that is particularly resistant. You can prune your tomatoes so that your tomatoes are never bushy. They're always long and scrawny, and but there's lots of airflow so that it's not beneficial to the growth of the bacteria. The bacteria and the fungus, they're caused by both. Anthracnose, I believe, is a bacteria. You can, if you've got leaves that are particularly affected by it at the bottom, you can prune those off. But here's the hard part is you can prune off those leaves, but in between each pruning with the scissors, you dip your scissors in alcohol because you're trying to keep from spreading it to the next leaf, So you can, for a while, prune off the bad leaves. But sometimes what you need to do is to yank up the whole plant and bag it and send it away because you don't want to spread it. The other problem is that often this becomes a soil-borne disease, so that this is why they tell us to rotate our crops. Because if you grow the tomatoes in the same place year after year after year, they can build up the different causes of the blights in the soil, and then the roots will bring it up the next year. So when you have an issue with this, the next year is when you fight back, because you can spray, there's all kinds of homemade sprays that say baking soda because it's alkaline, sets up. I find that it's equally effective to take my worm compost and put it in the water and water my plants with that, because it sets up a very diverse population of bacteria and fungus on the leaves, so that one particular kind can't get dominant. Sometimes all else fails, and what we got to do is, like I said, you got to yank that plant out and then try to plant in a different place next year. And possibly, I mean, if it gets bad enough and you've got a small space, what you need to do is you need to grow your plants and your tomatoes in containers. I'm sure that they sell fungicides that you can spray with, but you have to be so faithful with the spraying that you're sure not to get it. Okay, so that's early blight, and then I'm guessing that the next one is late blight. They're pretty much the same thing. They're caused by
Sally, I'm going to interrupt you quickly because we have a few questions in the chat all about tomatoes and blight. So how do you know the difference between leaves yellowing or like underwatered tomato plants versus, oh, this is definitely blight?
There are a bunch of different things that that cause problems on tomatoes. Tomatoes are the easiest, and yet they're not easy. Sometimes the most, once they go bad, it's hard. Underwatering and overwatering will just be wilty. Yellowing, I've seen some plants that just the whole plant went yellow in 3 days. And that was definitely a blight thing, because if it's a nutritional thing, they'll go yellow at the bottom. And then because the plant is trying to get the nutrients to the newest growing stuff, so the stuff on the bottom will go yellow, and then it's time to either top dress with fertilizer or add some worm compost or compost as mulch. So, and the other thing is, get yourself a magnifying glass, because you want to, I'm looking at this, this picture on the left, on the bottom, and that one, if it weren't for the brown spots, I would say that plant has spider mites. And the way to look at that is, you look at the underside of the leaf and see if you see things moving. Because if you see things moving, then you've got not a fungus, but a bug. And it's probably spider mites, which is a function of hot and dry. So first you have to ascertain, is it a bug? Is it nutritional? Is it happening slowly? Did it happen all at once? Then it's more likely a vascular disease. Does it cause lesions? Sometimes watering on a hot, bright day, the water will sit on the surface of the leaves and act like a magnifying glass, and it will concentrate the sun and it will burn the plants. So you have to decide if the brown spots on your leaves could possibly be a function of the sunlight on water. Or if you look at the one up here on the left, you can see that the concentric circles, that's definitely a fungus. That's definitely a blight. So lots and lots of different things can go bad with your tomatoes, generally starting at the bottom and working up. But
Sally, that's a good segue into our next question, which I forget, I think it was Lisa. Yeah, Lisa had asked that, well, first they started off by saying that none of the tomatoes in the community garden are doing well, and they're assuming that it's a fungal disease, and they're asking if they should replace the soil. So starting from the bottom, like, should they replace the soil to beat this tomato issue?
The tomatoes, by not doing well, you have to be more specific about that. And here's where Ask a Gardener comes in, because if you can send pictures of up close pictures and then back up pictures for context, and send them to the Ask a Gardener at penhort.org, somebody will help you do the research.
Master gardeners told Lisa that it was leaf spot,
Okay,
which I don't know what that is.
leaf spot is it's a symptom. Leaf spot is a symptom of early blight, late blight. Generally, it means the concentric circle lesions. So leaf spot is a common name for most of the other, all of the other ones. Is it matter whether it's early blight or late blight? Or fusarium? Then fusarium is a fusarium and verticillium are going to clog up the veins. Otherwise, I would like to say that I would love to say it's not a problem if it gets really bad. Yank your plant up. Make sure you clean up all of the trash from it. By the trash, but I mean, you know, the leaves that have fallen. Make sure you get them all cleaned up because you don't want to leave it there for next year. But if you have it 2 years in a row, you definitely want to start thinking about new soil. Either new soil or moving your plants to somewhere else, because you could absolutely kill off every single tomato plant in the garden, but then plant cabbage the following year, and since cabbage is not affected by it, you're not going to have any issue at all. Should you skip the tomatoes 1 year in that space? Yes, but put the tomatoes somewhere else. And if you've got such a small area that you can't get tomatoes in the ground in the same place, then plant them in a container. Yeah, easier said than done. Doesn't it sound like, just fix it, just like that. So are we done with slide? I didn't think so. Okay, there we go.
My slideshow stopped working for a second, so I had to redo it.
Okay, so early blight, late blight, you're gonna have the same, you're gonna have the same issues. It's just a different time of the year. So I think the next picture is,
The next picture
is late blight, and then I think cat facing and
blossom and rot.
Yeah, but I want to go back to the question about none of the tomatoes in the community garden are doing well. I would like to know more specifically what are the symptoms, because it could be poor nutrition. If the soil is new, it could be lack of nitrogen. If the whole garden is doing badly, it could be a water issue. It could be if everybody got their tomatoes from the same source, it could be a source issue. So let's get more information on that one, and possibly take that off with an email so that we can get more details of that. So let's go back. Did the slideshow die again?
I'm working on it, Sally. I'm gonna
so
put
let's
it up
talk
in just
about
a second.
blossom and rot and cat facing. Oh, this is also the late blight, but late blight seems to show up on tomatoes as well as on the leaves, and you can see maybe the symptoms are different, and it's also higher up on the plant because it's taken longer to get moved. So early blight happens mostly on the bottom of the plant. Late blight moves up the plant. Sometimes it's the same organisms, but it affects the plant differently. But I think that more it's different organisms. But you can see, and I am sad to say, I have this on one of my tomatoes, and it's one of my best producers. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to yank that sucker out. It breaks my heart because it's got the big beefsteaks on it, and they've been quite good. So moving on. Cassidy, you're fired. Oh my goodness. The next picture is, I'll tell you about it because everybody's had issues with it already this year, and that is blossom and rot, where the bottom of the tomato rots. And it's really disgusting because you've got this beautiful, otherwise beautiful tomato, but the bottom, oh, there you go. It is caused by a lack of calcium. The problem, and then people say, oh, but I put plenty of eggshells in my soil. It's not a shortage of calcium in the soil. It is generally a watering issue where it's been too wet and then too dry and then too wet and then too dry as the tomatoes are being formed. Calcium is a very large molecule and it takes a lot of water to move it up through the plant. So if there is moisture stress, either too much water, not enough water, and there are issues with the plant not being able to actively keep the water moving, the calcium doesn't get to the whole plant. And the very last piece of the plant that is getting this calcium from the water flow is the bottom of the fruit. So right at the end where the flower used to be, that doesn't get to fully develop because the cells can't hold together because there's no calcium holding the cells together. Calcium is a very important element in the development of fruit, in the development of everything, but in the plant, in the fruit. So what happens is the bottom dies. Some varieties are much worse affected than others. And it is not a disease, although mold or mildew can set in if it breaks open. So can you cut the bottom off and eat the rest of the tomato? Absolutely. Can you save seeds from that plant? I mean, if I've got three tomatoes and 2 of them have blossom end rot, I'm going to save the seeds from the third, but you still could save the seeds from one of these because it's not a disease. So what can you do? Best thing to do is when it has rained, if you haven't mulched, then mulch after it's rained or after you've done a good watering, because then you're going with you're not having this vacillation, this too much, too little, too much, too little. You're putting an insulating blanket over the surface of the soil, and that's what's going to give you, that's what's going to keep the moisture level.
Ellie, talking about moisture, this is a great time to ask about water. So someone posted in the chat that we're supposed to get this storm. I think it's like a byproduct of the hurricanes that are passing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're supposed to get several inches of rain
in
like the next 2 days.
I saw 6 inches of rain.
How do you think it's going to impact our gardens? My guess is that it's been so hot. I don't think we could overwater even if we tried.
No,
but I do think like so much water all of a sudden is a little bit iffier.
I ran out and I furiously planted seeds this morning. I mean, I figured we're going to get a lot of rain and it's still going to be hot. And by the time this storm blows over, if I plant today and the storm blows over by Wednesday, my seeds are already going to be sprouting. So to get rid, I already had 2 calls on this today. It's like, what are you doing to get rid of the hurricane? Are you knocking down your tomato cages? And it's like, I don't think there's anything that we can do except for if we have, one of the things that I did do is if I have any plants that are near the drip line of a tree, or where water is pouring out of a rain spout, I want to make sure that my plants are not where they're going to get smashed by all that rain. Is now a bad time to fertilize? If you know the rain is coming, it's a fine time to fertilize or put down compost. I don't know how much time you've got left. It's already starting to darken up here. So the hurricane is supposed to blow through, and then we're supposed to have possible rain in the 10 of the next 14 days. So I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of, if you can get out there and get seeds in the ground now, do it. I will dismiss you. Run, go plant seeds. We're going to see a lot of mold. We're going to see a lot of mildew. We're going to see plants that got, it's highly conducive for fungus growth, all this moisture and this heat. So that we're going to see a lot more fungus diseases out there. I don't know about the insects because I don't think they like the rain any more than we do. I'm not knocking my tomato stakes down. I'm just we're gonna hunker down and we're gonna roll with it. I don't know if that answered anybody's question.
I feel like that's just your mantra for this season.
We're just
it's just like, we're gonna hunker down, we're gonna roll with it.
Yeah. The other thing is, if it's gonna rain for 10 of the next 14 days, we're quite likely to get, it's possible we're gonna get a drought after that. Who knows? So I'm leaving my, my buckets face up. The other thing that I'm gonna do is every day I'm gonna go out and make sure that I don't have mosquitoes starting in any of my standing water, because there's no way to avoid standing water when it's raining 10 out of 14 days. So make sure that you've either dumped out your standing water or you've treated it with some sort of mosquito dunks. Oh yeah, the wind is picking up. We may make a dash for it in a little bit, but right now we're okay. Cat facing. Okay, cat facing is caused by a couple of different things. It is mostly with beefsteak tomatoes. With beefsteak tomatoes, you'll see it because, as you can see from this this middle tomato, the first red one, it looks like it could possibly be two tomatoes smushed together. You know, it's like because beefsteak tomatoes, if you look at the flowers of a cherry tomato, it's a perfect little star. But when you start to see beefsteak tomatoes, you see starting to see like 2 and 3 and 4 flowers squished together that are all going to get have the same ovary, and they're all going to get pollinated into one squishy thing. And that's what causes this, because they're not quite sure where the seams are. The other thing is that because they're not quite sure where the seams are of these different plants growing in jumbles, the skin is a little thicker there, or a little thinner, depending on where you're looking, so that when a plant suddenly gets a big drink of water, it fattens up the tomato, and that skin, where it's particularly thick or particularly thin, gets the stretch marks. And then the stretch marks start to make scars, and that's what causes all of this stuff. Some varieties get it worse than others. Sometimes it's a function of the weather. What can you do about it? You plant the varieties that don't do it so much, or you save the seeds from the plants that didn't do it so much, or you cut that piece off because the rest of the tomato is perfectly edible. Or if what you're seeing is obviously stretch marks rather than seams of where different tomatoes are all jumbled together, then watering and then mulching so that the level of water in the soil is more even. Okay, what comes after that? Okay, this is what we talked about before. This is our best bet as organic gardeners, is to protect our stuff from the elements. So we're protecting it from at this time of year, we're protecting from bugs. In the spring, we're protecting from the weather, from frost, and then we can leave those same covers on to protect us from bugs. But it's really nice that we can see into this, but is that effective to keep the bugs out? No. Is it effective to keep the frost out? It's pretty good, even if the sides are open. So we want to, as much as possible, exclude the bugs, prevent the problems before we get them. Okay. This is a bunch of different what we could call pesticides. BT is a bacteria again. BT is for some sorts of BT are specifically for caterpillars. So we would use them on cabbages, collards, broccoli, that kind of stuff, to keep the caterpillars off. It doesn't, I saw a question about sawflies go through there. Sawflies on especially on azaleas and on roses, not affected at all by BT because the sawfly is a fly. It's not, so they're a maggot rather than a caterpillar. So I'm not sure what the best thing, I'm guessing neem. Diatomaceous earth is for crawling insects and flea beetles. Boric acid is something that people use more for ants. I've not seen it used in the garden, but people use it to draw circles around where ants are coming in. Not sure how it works, so more research needed there. The one on the right, corn gluten, is a weed killer, but it's a pre-emergent weed killer. So it's something that is totally organic if you consider anything that has anything to do with corn organic. And you spread it on the ground and it keeps seeds from sprouting. So you would use it as a weed killer, and it doesn't last long. So it's a temporary weed killer. And then when it loses its potency, that's when you would then like plant your lawn or something. Mike McGrath is big on it. You bet your garden guy. I'm not quite sure why. Are there more? Yes, I thought so. Here's another on the far right. Since we were talking about corn gluten as a weed killer, vinegar, horticultural vinegar. Vinegar is usually 2 to 4% acidity, and horticultural vinegar is very concentrated, so it's like 25% acidity. It's very strong, and it will kill any plant that it touches. The thing is that rain will wash it away, but it will acidify your soil if you use enough of it. But it's something that you might use if you wanted to, say, if you had a brick path and it tended to fill up with weeds, you could spray the vinegar on it, especially on a sunny day, and everything will be dead by the next day. It doesn't, I mean, other people have used salt water for the same thing. The problem is that salt water stays with your soil forever. So not something that you want to use as a weed killer. Hydrogen peroxide is something that people are saying if you pour it into your rain barrels, it kills the mosquitoes. It's very effective. It works snicker snack, they're done. And supposedly does not, because it's hydrogen and oxygen, it's not going to affect your water, and you can still use your water to water plants with. Lime sulfur spray is something that there are 2 uses for that. One is as a fungicide, and some people have had some success with spraying it on their tomato plants. But probably by the time we start to see it on our tomato plants, the blights on our tomato plants, it's past the point where the lime sulfur would make a difference. But lime sulfur is also used as a preventative for fungus infections on grapevines, so that you would spray that, alternate that with spraying dormant oil on a grapevine before the leaves come out, because you kill off the fungus as the new leaves come out. They come out clean. I think neem is in the next slide. Yeah, neem is a plant-derived fungicide, insecticide, miticide, whatever. Neem is for chewing insects. It's also an oil, so you could use it as, because it's oily, it will stick to a plant and last longer. And the bugs have to eat it. It doesn't so much kill the bug when you spray it on the bug. They should eat it. It's much more effective that way. So we don't use it on sucking insects. More we would use the insecticidal soap. Insecticidal soap is It's really, really, really strong soap, and it works as an insecticide on soft-bodied insects because I'm not sure if it draws water from them or more since it coats them, it makes them unable to breathe in whatever manner bugs breathe. It's funny because, I mean, that's a cucumber beetle on the label under the word Safer. Safer is a brand name, Safer soap. So I'm guessing that the pyrethrin, which is also a plant derivative, would be the one that kills the cucumber beetle, not the insecticidal soap. So insecticidal soap with sucking insects, neem with chewing insects. But you can't overuse the neem because it will hurt the bees, because bees are there. So you need to be as directly, you can't just like broadcast that stuff. You got to be very specific in where you put it. I think that's it for, oh my goodness, I thought we were done with these. Sticky tape, awesome. I know that people are using sticky tape and yellow tape and greenhouse tape, there's one that's called, I'll remember the name in a minute. It's really, really, really sticky. It's like the mousetrap sticky. Not duct tape sticky. Duct tape is not sticky enough. I've seen people wrap duct tape around and it's not sticky enough to catch the bugs. You wrap it around, you can either wrap it around the base of a plant so that as bugs are coming up onto the plant, they hit the tape and they stick and they go no further. Or you can hang it in the garden because it is generally a much brighter yellow than this. It's like caution tape yellow. And a lot of bugs, especially whiteflies in a greenhouse, are attracted by that color and they go right to it and then they stick. So it's not just good for catching the bugs, but it's also good for monitoring the bugs because you can examine that and see who are the bugs that are in your garden right now. And so it's great if you're trying to forecast that a population is coming. You'll watch your little sticky cards. The Sabadilla is is the new popular bug spray, and it's considered organic. And so many of the mixes will have Sabadillo, and then there's another one that starts with an S, and I'll remember it after we're done. But it is another plant-derived, another one that's used. I'm surprised to see that it's used in homeopathy against allergies. That's a cool thing. I would like to learn. I'll learn more about that. That's my nighttime reading. Peppermint oil spray for pests is, it works better as a repellent than as a bug spray. But I have heard that people have had some success with aphids and the peppermint oil. I find that it works. I can be out in the garden and I'm getting eaten by mosquitoes, and I'll grab a handful of mint leaves and rub them on my arm, and for as long as it takes for the oil to evaporate, the mosquitoes will leave me alone. So any of the essential oils pretty much works for that. I have no idea what the guy on the left is because but I'm guessing that it's got Sabadilla and possibly pyrethrins in it. It's a wide spectrum.
It's not the Sabadilla. It's something similarly sounding to Sabadilla.
It's the other S word.
Sopra something. Soprasetto. I think that's an Italian sausage. I don't really remember.
Yes, if you've got really, you just grab an Italian sausage and start flailing away. Those bugs are gonna go.
I think that'll do the opposite of
I think the
deterring squirrels.
I'm sorry, that's stuck in my. Okay, all right, you just made me happy. I'll remember it. Honestly, I'll remember it as soon as we get off.
That was it though. That was the
Okay.
whole
So
slideshow.
that was everything that I wanted to talk about today. So do we have any more relevant to all of that?
We
Questions
definitely have good questions. Let me stop screen sharing so I can really look at the chat. Also, I think Marianne got us. Is it spinosad? I think it might be.
Spinosad, that's it.
Yeah.
Spinosad is a bacteria. It is not a plant derived. It's a soil bacteria that is fairly effective in preventing, because it is one of the beneficial bacteria. It's one of the ones that gets I think will grow in your worm compost, so that when you are taking your worm compost and adding it to water and spraying it onto your plants, that is one of the beneficial bacteria that's being put on your plants. So what somebody has done is to breed that specifically and use that as a disease. You know what? We are to the exact point every week when my bug repellent wears out. So I'm spraying myself with eucalyptus oil now. I smell really good. Okay, but what I would like to know from our studio audience, because Cassidy, can you grab a screen? Are we okay with? Are we good with seeing PowerPoints and videos? Is that feel okay for this group? Because we've not done that much in the past. We've more used props and like waved things ineffectively in front of a webcam and stuff like that. So you're good with, are we good with using PowerPoints for some of the stuff?
Elaine had asked about, okay, this is a long one, but it says, I'm not sure whether I have the insects listed. I have seen one big wasp looking thing, or maybe it was a spot-on lanternfly, whatever it is, flew toward a new mound of light colored dirt in a open space in my flower garden. I think it may be a nest. What can I do before there are more of them?
Okay, you need to identify what it is. There are all kinds of, I saw a poster that said, big yellow stingy things, and then it had them all identified. So you need to know what it is before you go, because one of the things that we're seeing right now is the cicada killer, which is a really big waspy looking things, and people are seeing them and they're saying, oh my God, the murder hornet is in Philadelphia. And cicada killers are not harmful. They eat cicadas, and that's all they eat. I mean, I like the cicadas, but they don't seem to be hurting anything. So yeah, you got to make a moral judgment there. But you need to identify it, because different wasps and different hornets and different of those critters are have different habits, and some of them we really want to leave them alone to do their thing. And other ones, it's like, oh my goodness, I can't go in the garden anymore. I can't go down the driveway because it's the hornet's nest. And sometimes those are the ones where you want to call in the professionals. So figure out what it is by getting as close to it. Get binoculars. Remember those? We used to have those. Or zoom in on your camera lens on your phone so that you can see, because like there's bald-faced hornets, there's yellow jackets, there's I can't even begin to name them all, but I know my sister's allergic to all of them. So, but find out what they are.
Sorry, I unmuted myself. It zoomed by so fast, I couldn't really tell what it was, but it was kind of big, like, I don't know, 1.5 inches or so. And it almost looked like I don't know how to describe it. It was partially like the light colored wings of the spider lanternfly, but I thought when I first saw it that would have been one of those cicada killers, and I saw a picture of it, but I haven't seen a picture of it that looked like that since, so that I could have shown you.
The other thing that you can do is also, if you take a picture of the nest, or what you think might be the nest, you can also, and that's another Ask a Gardener thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks.
but get pictures if at all possible, the best description that you can, because again, I know that there are moths that look like wasps, and there are wasps that look like moths, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, and we need to do our homework before we go out there and start wreaking havoc.
Yeah, it's just in a bad spot because my kids work late and they come home in the dark and this thing's out there and I don't want anything to happen to them. It's right like towards the doorway. So.
Oh, okay. So so watch it at different times of the day to see if you can't catch, because you've got nothing else to do right now, right? But they'll watch hornets. So watch as much as you can to see if you can't get clues. Otherwise, you call in the pros.
Okay, thank you.
So we learned that blight is like a fungal thing in the soil. And Deborah was asking if that's true, does blight only affect tomatoes or can it affect your other crops too?
It's very specific. The blights that we have that show up on tomatoes are very specific to tomatoes. And even I have seen, there are some that will affect other related plants. Like I have seen Fusarium, which is the vascular disease of tomatoes. I have seen it affect eggplants as well. I have tomatoes, potatoes. I've seen the blight on potatoes as well. And I mean, my family is here because we got blight on the potatoes in Ireland. So related plants will get some related diseases, but different families will not share diseases. So like I said, if you've got the blight in the ground from repeated years of tomatoes there, if you plant corn there, or you plant carrots or cabbage or something that's totally unrelated to tomatoes, not an issue. Nutrient deficiencies, on the other hand, if what you decide that's wrong with your tomato is that there's not enough oomph in the soil, planting something else there in that same place is not necessary. They will also have issues. I mean, that's how you could tell that it's nutritionally related. So if in doubt, plant beans in the same place that you had tomatoes last year.
Sally, let's talk about more vicious pests like squirrels, your neighborhood cats, your deer. We had a ton of questions about that come up in the chat, which I was very quick to say, like putting the little skewers and the forks in the soil and netting, but do you have any other advice around that?
I am learning by doing. I have groundhog issues, and knock wood, I have been able to exclude the young ones from my hoop house, but I have not figured out. I have a fenced garden, and they get in. They got in last night, and I don't know how they got in. And I'm at this point trying to figure out, did the suckers climb the fence to get in, or do I have deer and not know it on 10th Street, and they're reaching over the fence and eating my beans? But something ate my beans last night, and I've got fencing, and underneath we need garden cams. Yes, somebody suggested that to me today. Is there something that you can do about squirrels? People have moderate success with hot pepper, which is cruel, but maybe they'll learn. As far as, you have to do something to make them not happy to be there, and that they would rather go somewhere else than eat your stuff because it's such a nuisance to them. So every day I walk the fence line of my garden to see where they're getting in and where can I improve things. And it takes them at least a week to figure it out. The squirrels, again, the same thing. They will go through such obstacle courses to get to your stuff. And then they take one bite and then they walk away. So do I have an answer for that? No, I don't have a good answer for that. Persistence, confusion, noise, stabby things. I'm not going to recommend shotguns with salt in them. I'm not going to recommend water pistols. Water pistols I would recommend, but you have to catch them. So
wait, so Karen just put this in the chat, and it's actually kind of genius, but they said put up a non-squirrel proof bird feeder. That way they're attracted to the bird feeder and they're less likely to go in your garden. So you're still feeding the squirrels, but you're hopefully also feeding the birds.
I like that. I like that. Now,
because normally we just get mad that the squirrels are in the bird feeders, but this is like, haha, we tricked you, suckers. So.
And then they say, ha ha ha, we tricked you, suckers.
Exactly.
We got what we wanted. So, plastic owls in the garden isn't going to do much for groundhogs because they don't look up. They walk around on the, but squirrels maybe. Plastic snakes, I've seen people say that. CDs hanging from a string so that they glitter and make a noise when the wind blows. I got no apples this year. Every single apple has been stolen by squirrels. Every single apple, and I have 12 trees. So I think when it all hits the fan, we're going to be eating squirrels here. The neighborhood cats, I'm not going to eat. I draw the line there. Groundhogs, maybe. Squirrels, maybe. Not the cats.
Yeah, you don't eat the neighborhood cats, Sally. You just take them in and then they become your pets.
They become my pets. And then they live indoors and they don't bother. They don't dig in my plantings. Netting confuses deer. Squirrels will go through netting. Is this an especially bad year for squirrels? It seems to be. And I don't know if the squirrels are much worse this year or we're home more so we see them more. I'm also told this is a bumper year for songbirds and butterflies, but that could also be because we're home more.
What does that mean, a bumper year?
A really good year, when the population is bumped up.
They're the boomers.
The boomers.
We're about to have a boomer cycle of
yeah, well,
songbirds.
I mean, we certainly got the boomer cycle of the spotted lanternfly, that's for sure. Okay, so do we got any more hot questions? Because I want to show something that I'm going to be doing. We are mosquito heaven here. This got recommended to me. This is not a product endorsement because I don't know this thing from Adam, but this is something that is both scent and pheromone trap, no batteries. It looks like this thing. I'm gonna put it together and I'm gonna set it up and see how it works, and I will report back next week because I am so tired of these darn mosquitoes eating me alive. So I've been trying out different mosquito organic stuff because I don't want to use the DEET anymore. And if anybody has any particular products that they've been using that they would like to recommend to other people, bring them next week to show us. All right, we're passing 6 o'clock. So I love y'all, but I have a life and I bet you do too. So let's all get back to it. Don't get washed away in the hurricane. Don't stand under any big trees. Be safe, be careful, wear your mask, be nice to everybody, be kind. And we'll see y'all next week.